hi everybody. Welcome to the new episode of Everything Design Show. So today we have a special guest. We have Angela Ng, and I've actually known Angela about a year or so, and she got introduced to us at SIT and the Glasgow School of Art, and she started teaching. And her background is actually in comms, marketing. She's got a wide range of experiences. That's why we thought that she was great to come and teach our communication design students last year. And the feedback that we've got so far was quite positive. So I've just invited her today and just to share a little bit about what she's been doing. And I think the work that she's been doing is quite interesting, looking at design thinking. She also writes books. She's been looking at this whole idea of understanding emotions or diving deeper into this whole topic of emotions. But I shan't go on too long. I'll just let Angela give a quick introduction of herself, and then I'll go and shoot some questions at her later on. But Angela, hi, thank you for coming.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Hello,
yes.
everybody.
Hello. Yes.
So I do a self-introduction of myself.
Yeah. So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then So a quick introduction. Yeah.
Okay, so I spent 20 years in corporate advertising and marketing industry. My role in the corporate was actually as a media strategist. I actually study consumer behavior, understand their behavior, and actually strategize advertising marketing campaigns towards them. And I've kind of been all around from the agency to the vendor to the client side. So I've been kind of like 360 in all the different roles. And during that 20 years, what I've used the process is very much a design thinking process, except that we applied it very specifically to communications, to actually design communication messages, to actually design marketing campaigns. Yeah, so that's my background, coming from the comms industry and yet applying design thinking for about 20 years as part of my work.
Yeah. Great. I mean, so I think that a long sort of experience, the wealth of experience that Angela has, I think is something that we've always been very excited about, especially in terms of what she can share with the students. But the other aspect apart from not just that comms, because when we talk about comms or marketing, there's usually quite I wouldn't say there are quite standard procedures, like in that sense, right? There's a school of thought, that looks at advertising, marketing, and communications. But it's very interesting to sort of see how a newer, I wouldn't say a very new, but a newer school of thought in terms of design thinking is also being applied within the advertising, the comms world. But I think Angela also has been working a lot in understanding people's behaviors, behavioral science, behavioral economics to a certain extent, and as well as looking at this whole idea of emotions. But maybe Angela, why don't you tell us about how did this journey of design thinking start for you? I mean, looking back at your experiences, and then that's, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a big shift, but that slight shift, into this design thinking world that we have.
Yes. Yeah. So it started out as a media strategist. We actually process a lot of data. We work with the research houses like AC Nielsen, where they provide us with consumer data in terms of their behavior, in terms of their media consumption, in terms of even how they purchase, their psychographics, demographics, all sorts of data. So we actually use this data. We first study and segment the consumers, and then try to understand, get some insights out of it. And along that, sometimes all these secondary data is not sufficient. So we will conduct our own focus group to actually get into in-depth understanding of the consumers and then design the campaigns for them. So if you look at this process, it's very similar to design thinking. But of course, back 20 years ago, we don't call it design thinking. And I think So it is a slightly different terminology, and design thinking now has actually developed or evolved into more specific steps in that. And if you look at marketing and advertising, a lot of times to create a kind of experiential messages for consumers, or to create a kind of experience for consumers, it actually involves a lot of emotions. So I personally believe that emotions drives experiences. It is in the emotions that we create, or the emotions that we are able to evoke, that experiences are being created. If you just process or give information as in a very factual manner, you may not be able to generate the desired experiences that you want. So this is why I got really interested and intrigued with emotions, because I realized that it plays such an important and big part in our life, not just on a personal level, but for the work that I've done for the past 20 years, it has been a big part, because the better or the more successful campaigns are usually the ones that are able to evoke emotions very, very well.
Yeah, and I think these emotions. I mean, I think you talked about it quite succinctly to say that actually the experiences are very strongly connected to this whole idea of emotions.
Yeah,
And I think when we buy things, or even now, consumer culture, we have this
yeah,
whole thing of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out.
yeah,
Or they talk about herd mentality. Or now, even when we sort of see people buying hoarding things, maybe even today,
yeah,
I'm scared, therefore I buy more. So the
yeah,
emotions definitely definitely does play a part, especially in terms of purchasing and
yeah.
what we deciding what we buy. But I'm sure you're in your experience, you've also seen emotions being applied in other fields, right? Not just advertising or consumer culture, or purchasing. What are some of these other areas that you've
Yeah.
seen design thinking or emotion playing a very key role?
So a lot of the lectures that I'm doing now on design thinking actually are applications into the service industry. So service industry is big on actually how to design the service to provide a certain good experiences to the customer. I mean hotels, right? I mean, so you have the wide range of hotels, from the super basic to the super luxury. And if you look at the super luxury brands, it is actually all about the experiences that they actually bring to the table, and thus they are able to command a better premium in terms of the charges that was being the pricing that was actually being put on the services. Yeah. So it is the same for luxury products as well. So even when it comes to product designs, I mean, just designing a good product, it itself is just specifications and technology, but how that product, what kind of role that the product plays in the consumer's life, and what kind of experiences it enhances the consumers on a day-to-day basis, that experiential itself differentiate products from products A to products B. And this is why even though very functional products such as a handbag, you can see the price range varies purely because of the branding, but it's not just the branding, but also because of the kind of experience that is being created by the brand, that is packed to certain fashion products, jewelry products, and in fact all sorts of products that is in our day-to-day life, like even kitchen products. Right, and there are certain yeah, I saw that, that's
Yeah, in
why
my kitchen, yes,
reminded
yes,
me, there are
yeah.
certain kitchen products that actually brings certain promises to the consumer in terms of better cooking experiences, in terms of better after sales services, and how it actually enhances a person's lifestyle in terms of being a more efficient cook, or even just a family cook that actually is able to serve restaurant-like food. So all those are part and parcels of products design that brings about certain experiences to the consumer. And all these experiences, if you think about it, that we talk about, like efficiency, comfort, a sense of bewilderment, all these are actually packed to emotions. So emotions is at the fundamental of all this design.
Yeah. So I mean, I think emotions is also discussed. I think there have been a few design thinking speakers and people that talk about emotion from a self, a perspective of self. Like, how do I design better for myself or for the people around me? But where you're coming from is really we're driving this whole idea that businesses and services looking at experiences. They're also looking at the different facets, right? You're saying that I don't just create a product, right? But I create multiple layers to that particular product, and from the back end all the way to the front end, there's a lot of different there are different points and touch points that you can see how these emotions are being considered, right? As well as not being considered.
So I kind of like to simplify things, and to me the world is very simple now, in the sense that it's either you're designing for computers, for technology. That means that actually you're programming enhance the data, the digital, the technology functioning of the digital world that we're living in, or you're designing for human beings. And as long as your business, your products, whatever that you're doing is actually dealing with human beings, and at the core of human beings that differentiate us from the computer is actually really our emotions.
Do you see, with this differentiation, do you think, I agree that there are two, when it comes to design thinking or even design in general, there are two quite big, I would say, facets or two different areas. One is the UI, UX, digital that you mentioned, right? And then the other one is the other aspects, the experiences, the services. Is it hard, based on what you've seen so far, is it hard to separate the two of them, or are you seeing organizations do quite well in integrating both of them? And
I think organizations need to integrate in order to actually have a notch up and actually kind of function in kind of ahead the curve to stay competitive. Because if you look at UX actually itself is talking about experience. So it's a kind of experiential design. So you do need to take the consumer into consideration. But maybe UI, when you talk about programming, the coding and all that, then it is the back end support. So that needs to be on par. That needs to catch up as well in order to deliver the kind of fine experience that we want to deliver to the consumer. If I'm not sure if you remember how long have we have the internet? Maybe 20 years. We have the internet for about 20 years. Year 2000, I remember. And when it first came on, there were a lot of problems, things that we thought it could do, it cannot do. So that causes a lot of frustration. But then it has evolved so fast into even now we can have internet on our smartphones. So, the better the back end, the technology evolve, of course, it will then be able to bring about better enhancement of the experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I think there have been quite a few companies that do both quite well, the overall experiences as well as their digital. But for me, what I notice is that a lot of companies want to go and do digital, but they don't actually figure out their experience side well enough. Like, they haven't. I noticed that a lot of there are some companies they rush to go in to do digital, but they don't do so much of that.
So many companies, because they want to catch on the digital wave, right? So because everything is about digital now, so let's go digital. But we forgot that digital is supposed to be a support and enhancement to the human experience life. So if you're doing digital for the sake of doing digital and without actually thinking of how it can actually bring benefits to the human life, then it becomes a redundant technology or a process that you are creating. Just like, when we start to promote digitalization, many organizations actually want to shift very quickly into digitalization by introducing certain technologies, certain software. And I have this feedback from organization, business, and even some of my students who actually work in service organization. They feel a lot of frustration. They feel a lot of resistance adapting or using the CRM system that was being introduced to them by the company. Because the system seems to actually make their work less effective or efficient than what it was supposed to do. So there have been many discussions to actually fine-tune the system in order to bring it to become something that is of useful to the organization. So it is really important to actually design the tools with human in mind and not just rushing to do digitalization for the sake of it.
Yeah. So I mean, you've now been teaching design thinking, through a lot of the adult learning courses, and you teach, I think you teach in a few institutions, and you've been doing like TED Talks as well. You've been, doing you've been speaking at a few workshops as well. So, based on your experience so far, and this whole understanding the user's experience, defining the experiences, how do you get your stakeholders, your students, to really start defining these emotions and these experiences? Is there a trick, or is there, not say a trick, but is there a tip that you can share to say that, this is how I get my stakeholders to really sit down and define these emotions?
Yeah. So one of the things that I taught is actually to actually start building an emotional vocabulary list. It is really important because many times, let's say if you design something and I ask the designer, so what kind of emotions do you want to evoke in the consumer when they actually interact or use your design? They are actually struggling with emotional words to describe the experience, right? So they will say, oh, feel good or feel positive or make them feel happy. But then I would always push them a bit further and say that how happy? What do you mean by happy? Because they feel pleased, they feel satisfied, it's a kind of positive feeling. As versus they feel excited, they feel exuberated. All these are also positive feeling, but on different intensity. So the more precise you are able to actually label the emotions, the better you are able to create the design to actually really bring out the emotions, because you become very specific about it. So for a start, I always encourage all designers to be specific about the emotion, but that they need to start actually developing a list of emotional vocabulary. And emotions are actually basically split into 6 big categories if you look at the research. So based on that 6 big categories, there are actually different intensity. The categories combine to create different emotions. So it is good for us to actually start from there to actually kind of understand the emotion we will and all the different spectrums of emotions that we can actually have as a human being.
Yeah, and when you're talking about these specific emotions, I actually, when you talk about it, I can imagine, if I was trying to bring in a customer, right, to my business or my organization, or to understand my design outcomes, when you say, oh, somebody who's excited, exuberant, versus somebody who's pleased, because when I think about that, that actually means you're also trying to either bring in a customer quickly, to say, I want this person to be very excited about my product, to make a quick purchase decision, rather than somebody who, if I want somebody who's pleased, to understand my product very well, very clearly, to make a conscious decision. And I could imagine that, if you were a different type of company, right? If you were selling, let's say, fashion items, then the emotion that you want to bring your customers on is, maybe the excitement a little bit more.
Yeah.
But if you were maybe a bank or an insurance company, then the emotion that you're trying to foster from your client is not something of exuberance. You don't want them to just be very excited about something and then the passion sort of falls off, right? So I mean, that sounds like it's very important when we talk about defining the emotion very specifically, right?
Yeah, totally. I think totally.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's one way, which is defining those emotions. Do you find that when you're discussing these with the stakeholders, especially the business owners or your clients that you typically will talk to, is it a difficult process for them to really sit down and define? Like, how long does this process usually take for them? A day, a week, or maybe longer? Yeah.
I think it really depends on individual, the stakeholders, how so-called emotionally evolved they are themselves, or the designers themselves. So some designers, they are very in tune with emotions, right? So they are able to label or identify the emotions very clearly, and they are able to actually put together elements that actually create exactly that kind of emotions. But of course, that takes years of practices. And some designers specializes in certain types of emotions. It's just like your horror movie. The good directors, the good script writer who always write horror movies, if they're really able to capture on the tension and the suspense and make people jump in their seats, versus the one who created romantic comedies, they tend to be very different people. So there is also specialization into creating emotions. That will take a while, but I think for a start, it really depends on how in tune you are about emotions. And many people tend to take emotions for granted.
Yep.
We take it that it's just part of us. We feel it. We don't feel it. We don't feel it. But actually, we can all learn about emotions. It's something that we can actually study, learn, understand it better. And actually build our vocabulary list and build our techniques in creating those emotions over time.
Yeah. So, and I think you when you're talking about this, when designers also being very attuned with the emotions, I think that's something that as designers we need to consider a little bit more, because when we're also talking to our clients, our vocabulary or the emotion that we're trying to get our clients to to experience is also very different, right? We also want them to get excited, we want them to be able to understand, to be able to comprehend. So being able to build a vocabulary, not just in emotions, but I think in terminologies and language is also quite important. I think just now you also spoke. I think when you were talking, I think I remember the point that you made in one of our previous conversations, which was I think you had a discussion with someone else about emotions and relationships, because relationships was something that my PhD topic I've always been very interested in, and the things that I've been working on. So one of the conversations that I had with Angela in the past was, how can we look at emotions a little bit better? And I think one of the comments that came up was that actually men are not, I wouldn't say poor, but not as well well versed in the emotional vocabulary. So that is for the relationship side, right? But do you think that applies as well within design? Like, do you see that when you're looking in the design world, that the females as compared to the males are a little bit more well versed in that emotional vocabulary, in that communication of emotions, or identifying the experiences? Do you see that happening as well in the design field, not just in relationships?
So I actually think that men are not so well versed in expressing their emotion is a social construct. It is because for many years men has been kind of expected socially to behave in a certain manner, like don't show emotion, be strong, be the provider, So they have been kind of conditioned into that role and kind of avoid dealing with emotions or even learning the emotional vocabulary. But then interestingly, if you look at the art scene or the designers, right? I mean, I also dealt in the art scenes, with the artists before. And you notice that the men are not really your standard, or not your socially constructed kind of men, because people in the art scene, maybe they have to learn the art of expression, so they become more expressive. Some of the designers as well, especially if they come from artist, musician background, they tend to be more expressive with their emotions. So in the design field, I think that the outcome is quite obvious, because I don't see the differences between the guys, the boys, or the girls, or the men versus the women designer. What I see really is the one who is able to actually express their emotions better tend to be a better designer, tend to be able to bring out the elements of the emotions that they want to evoke better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, not necessarily. So I mean, I think yeah. I mean, just based on my experience as well, the within the design field, maybe it's a work hazard lah. Some may say, right, to be quite emotional. There's some stereotypes to say that designers cannot let go of their designs. They get very emotionally attached to their design to design work, which goes against a little bit of that design thinking, ideology of being iterative and not putting too much emotion on the work itself. But yeah, I do agree that a lot of designers that we've seen sometimes are quite emotional. Okay, not sorry. The word is not emotion. Not say emotional, but in tune with
In tune to
in
their
tune to their
emotions.
emotions. Yeah. So I think that we are also, I think a key value that most designers have is also being able to empathize with people. I think that's a very
Yeah.
core a core skill that most designers have, to say that I need to empathize with my client or my user at the end of the day. And if I'm able to do that, then I'm also able to create these better outcomes lah.
Yeah.
And I
True.
think so I guess the next question I actually have is when you look at these at designers, right, the difference is, say, are you more emotionally inclined, like are you do you have a wider emotional vocabulary and range of emotions to somebody who may not have that range of emotions? Do you see the extreme end, where people or designers are, where we can categorize them as very emotional? Do you think that is a positive, or do you think that's a negative, or that doesn't really matter in that sense?
So I believe that actually so there are different levels of understanding this. So I believe that everybody actually has the same range of emotions. We are kind of born with it. It's our nature. But we learn to express them differently because all of us have different upbringings. Our parents have different sentiments, personalities, and all that. So that has an impact on us. So we express them differently. So we don't have the same form of expression. So when you talk about a person, a designer being extremely emotional, then that's another level of what we call emotional management skills, right?
I
So
see.
this very emotional designer, is it allowing his or her emotions to affect or impact his work or her work in a negative or positive way? Because people can get so drowned. I mean, not just designers. I mean, all of us, right, can be so overwhelmed with emotions that actually impacted our life, our day to day, our work, even going to work, getting out of bed, going to work. But we can also actually turn the better designers or the better artists, I would even say, they will be able to leverage on the emotions or the empathy that they feel and turn it into work of designs, work of art, or work of innovation. So then I would say that they have actually used the emotion well. So I think there is also part of nature and nurture. The nature is that we all have the same range of emotion. The nurture is then the skills of managing that and the techniques of actually using that energy to actually put it into some form of expression that benefit the bigger general public.
I mean, so I mean, I think from this we can see that there's two. We need to be also very clear lah, right? We say that one is the emotional management, to say that how does
Yes.
a person manage their own emotions, but there's also the other aspect, which is the understanding of those emotions. Those to say that, oh, actually what I'm feeling today is not just down, but what I'm feeling or what I want the person to feel is to it's not just a positive feeling, but it's it's a feeling of joy or satisfaction, or if it's an emotional negative feeling, then it's is it sadness, is it disappointment, and so on and so forth. So it's about that vocabulary. Number one is to say that, okay, does the person have that ability to define these emotions? So it's about the defining, and then for themselves also is that about that management of that emotion as well. It's also
So for the designers, I believe designers have dual role. So most of us, if we are not in, we kind of don't, most depends on your job. Let's say if you're an accountant, you just need to kind of tabulate numbers and make sure that the numbers tally in the accounts. You don't really have to deal with so much human emotions, right? So you just need to self-manage your own emotions. But I think designers had dual role in the sense that first they have to motivate themselves as designers, and then they need to actually understand emotions to be able to design for the target audience or for the consumers, so that whatever they design is taken in by the consumer or the target audience in the way that they have designated the design to be. So the designers had this role of self-management, but also they need to know the technique of being able to manipulate and deliver the emotions in the appropriate manner.
So actually, I think this is a very very clear train of thought and a very clear school of thought, which is I think a lot of people typically, when it comes to a business aspect, sometimes emotions or experiences are being played down because it's very hard to it's not a clear reflection of numbers or profit and loss and things like that, but it's actually a very important foundation before we even look at some of these things. But yeah, I wanted to sort of ask you, so we've talked about this, the designer's journey, their emotions and so on and so forth. But I also wanted to ask, when I think the types of designers that we're discussing is, maybe people who've been, trained as in the poly level or in school of art, design. They go to uni, they work for a few years, this vocabulary is, they may not be super super defined for them, but they, I think they will definitely know, and they have some experiences with the terms of experience and emotions, and in some cases of communications, then it's about brand and so on and so forth. So they are, I think most designers will have been exposed to it to a certain extent, but from your experience, now when teaching a lot of these adult learners, right? And I would imagine some of them do come from the backgrounds, like you're talking about like accountancy. Maybe they come from a finance background, maybe they come from a service background or engineering background, and they're learning about these things. How are they dealing? Do you see a difference in terms of how they deal with it? Is it easy for them as well, or is it a little bit more difficult for people who have not been previously trained in design, but they're learning design thinking or they're learning UX at a later stage?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, in order to make them understand how emotions actually is very important in design, right? I actually leverage on their life experiences, because for the adults learner, they have a wealth of life experiences and they've been through stuff, right? Say they've been through good times, they've been through bad times. So they have gone through all this to actually experience the range of emotions. But then again, sometimes they may not realize that there was a way to articulate it. So it is quite interesting when I interact with them that I also see the differences between those who are more in tune with the emotions, those who had the vocabulary list versus those who actually really struggle to identify and label their emotions. But they all had the same understanding that, oh, okay, this is how design of emotions works. And this is why I'm having all these experiences in my life, and during certain times in my life, how my emotions actually affect or impact those experiences. So I think the parallel is definitely there. It's easy for them to understand as adults learner, but the path to develop their skill, I think, is no different from the undergrads. Actually, it is still about reading more books to understand, or developing the emotion vocabulary list.
Yeah, so I think one skill that I think a lot of designers of any age, of any background, it's really about building that emotional vocabulary, right? I think that's something that's a very big important aspect. So we've talked about quite a bit about design thinking, applying emotions into it, looking at it from I would say more of a corporate professional level. But I also know that you've been looking at emotions in other fields, right? So you recently last year published a children's book on emotions. Maybe you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, shall I share screen
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you?
yeah. Please, please, please. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Share screen, share screen. Yeah,
Okay, let
we can
me
see. So,
show you the book.
yeah.
You see
So
my book, right?
yes, yes, I have. Yeah. It's just that I've left. It's currently in the office, and I can't bring it back home because now in lockdown. But yeah, for those who are listening, just the audio. So basically, Angela is showing us the book, which is What
Yeah.
Colors Are You Feeling? And also it was there, and this was Angela's book that she published last year, and you can buy it from Amazon.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazon, there is
Amazon.
another local Singapore website called Chalk and Chakras. They carry my books as well.
Yeah.
The School of Positive Psychology also carries this book. Yeah, so
Yeah. I will
at
put.
the moment
Yeah.
there's three places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will put the link to the book in the descriptions. But yeah, Angela, why don't you for those who are watching on YouTube, why not we can see what the book is, and then maybe you can
Yeah.
show us a little bit about that.
So from my experiences dealing with consumer behavior and studying behavioral science, what got me really intrigued and I really want to specialize in is actually the emotions part. So I actually a few years ago, about 6 years ago, I started a new learning journey to embark on studying psychology. And even within the field of psychology, it is so big and so broad,
Yeah.
right? I actually specialize in what we call positive psychology. So, positive psychology is not your clinical psychology. It is not to treat mental illness, but it is actually to bring about more well being to kind of like general, healthy, average people who also kind of have our challenges, have our down days, have our days that we're all struggling like right now during this COVID-19 period, right? So positive psychology, it is actually the study of well-being and how we can use certain interventions to enhance people's well-being. And because of my background, my focus, my thesis actually then is on emotions, like how we actually use emotions to bring about more well-being for ourselves instead of just focusing always on the external world of more material achievements to make us happier, but actually go inwards to actually uncover and understand our emotions and use that to our advantage to make us feel more fulfilled, more happy, more satisfied with life. So that journey started 6 years ago, and the idea of the book started then as well. It's a long journey, and I wrote the book when I was in London at Middlesex University doing a summer course on psychology. But then I didn't meet the right illustrator until 2 years ago. So Mei Zi, who illustrated this book for me, is actually one of my students,
Oh,
one of
okay.
my design students,
Yeah.
who is very talented with illustration. So after she has graduated, I happened to show her what I've written. Then she said, "Oh, this is interesting," and she offered to illustrate for me. So I worked with her. It was a slow process. It took 2 years because she's working, I'm working. We each have our full-time job, and we kind of really take our time at it because we want this to be a good product, something that is meaningful, rather than just something that we rush it out within a certain time frame. So finally, it was launched, November last year. It's called What Colors Are You Feeling? Inside the book, there are actually 6 sections. Each section represents a different color, but each color does not represent only one emotion. Okay, so this is something I have to clarify. So one color doesn't really represent one emotions, but it actually kind of represent a range of different emotions. And like yellow stands for joy, but when you get too much joy, you're always constantly seeking for joy. You tend to get burnt as well, like sunburnt. So there's always the shadow side of each emotions, and not all negative emotions are bad as well. So there's always a positive side of certain emotions, because all emotions are important. they are signals to actually kind of guide us to kind of move forward to in our life in a more positive way. But a lot of times, all these signals are kind of ignored or misread. So the idea of this book is to actually kind of like start with the step one, the very fundamental, to get people to actually start building their emotional vocabulary based on the six different groups of main category of emotions. So we have joy, we have sadness, fear, guilt, we have jealousy, and we have, I forgot one more. Joy, sadness, guilt, jealousy, fear. Oh, and anger. Yes, anger.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have 6 categories of emotions. We get people to start building their emotional vocabulary there. And within each section, I've also placed what we call positive psychology interventions within the book. And these interventions are actually interesting activities that help people to kind of build up their so-called feel-good feelings. So we have like happiness bank where people can kind of store and put up their happy moments so that they can look at it and feel like, oh, I've got actually a wealth in my life that I may have sometimes, forgot about it. Then we have gratitude, because gratitude is really a very powerful intervention. If we do it on a regular basis, it helps us to be more resourceful, and especially during difficult times like COVID-19, right? Being able to have gratitude for basic and simple things really helps to make life much easier. Then there's also mindfulness activity, a simple guide to let people play along while they breathe in and breathe out slowly. And then there are strength spotting activity, and there's also one kind act a day. So all this good, when you practice one kind act, it actually brings up a lot more of positive emotions to actually kind of counter or help the people to overcome their negative emotions. And there's also finally the last activity is a forgiveness letter.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's very hard to move away from I think your design background, because even when when we talk about this your book, which is targeted at it was targeted at primary school children or younger, is it?
Yeah, it's actually targeted at kids who has the ability to actually start spelling words.
Yeah.
So at least 7 years, but I've seen kids, junior kids these days, as young as 5 or 6 years old, they have actually started using my book. So as long as the kids can actually start spelling like happy or sad, that's a good time to actually start using this book with them. And even if they can't spell the words or come up with the words, there are the other positive psychology interventions like the mindfulness game that can be played by kids of any age, like 3 years old onwards or 4 years old, if they can to get breathe in, breathe out, simple activities like that can be actually enjoyed by them. But more importantly, what I hope to achieve is that this is a book for parents and kids to enjoy together. So also for the adults, for the parents to actually kind of build their own emotion vocabulary, because it's not just the kids, right? I mean, kids learn very fast, but it's adults. We are actually also struggling with labeling our emotions. So I was hoping that this book can actually bring the adults and kids together to kind of spend more parent and kids bonding time, and also to actually then develop the emotion vocabulary together as a family.
Yeah, and you've already done some workshops with this particular book, right? You've already gone out to.
I've done some book talks and some simple activities during those book talks. The workshop originally was supposed to launch in March, but because of COVID-19, now it's been postponed.
Yeah. But I mean, so far with the experiences, especially because I mean, when I think about this particular book, yes, it's targeted at at the younger 7, when they start learning how to spell. But even when you're talking about these, understanding the vocabulary, and you're also talking about this whole idea that there are interventions, right? Like we identify that there may be a lack in terms of understanding the gratitude, or a lack in terms of the emotional management, and then there is breathing exercises or other exercises that you have, right? So I even imagine that this actually could be something that adults could be working on in terms of that wellness, right? And not just for parents.
Totally.
So yeah, I would,
It's actually for everyone.
yeah. So I mean, I think that sounds like a very good initiative. I'm sure you will be able to create an online tool. Hopefully, COVID doesn't, the circuit breaker doesn't extend. But if it does, then we may have to try maybe more digital options. I think now we're seeing
True.
quite a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
what
that.
we are working on now as well. To actually, the workshops can't originally designed for in classroom, so now we can't do that anymore. We are going to bring the lessons on emotions and the workshops online. So that more people can enjoy. Hopefully it will get done sooner.
Hopefully,
But I think we want to focus on doing it right and doing it well instead of rushing it. We're not opportunistic. I'm not opportunistic about this project.
But it's really interesting to see how your pet project, on the side, which is this book that is for understanding on a wellness aspect lah. I wouldn't say it's just for kids, but a general wellness aspect of emotions and understanding the emotions, and how also your professional world actually comes very closely to each other, and how they work very well with each other from a methodological perspective, from a theoretical perspective. So I'm actually quite inspired to see that people can take their professional world, and their professional skills, and look at applying it for a better world, in that sense, to say that, okay, we need to create more wellness for people, for them to understand themselves better, to create to look at their lives a little bit better, and define what's good or happiness for them. So it's quite inspiring to see how you've been able to apply that. So I will put the links to Angela's book in the description, and then you can definitely look at that. So I want to just thank Angela for her time. I think Angela's really shared quite a lot, especially about her, how she applies or helps to seek help people and designers and stakeholders and students to understand emotions better, especially from a emotional vocabulary, as well as from an emotional management perspective. And also it's good to see how her book is also tying in this idea of understanding emotions. But before you go, Angela, is there anything else that you maybe want to share with the speakers, or any thoughts, or any maybe tips that you can sort of give, especially in this time of COVID, on how maybe what's one thing that we could do to on our own, in our own homes, to maybe improve our own emotional vocabulary, or even emotional management?
I think this COVID time is actually the best time for us to actually kind of develop and practice this emotional awareness skills, right? Because many people are kind of stuck at home feeling frustrated, and parents with kids running around have to work from home and have to manage the kids' home-based learning, feeling very stressed out. So there will be a lot of intense emotions coming up during this period of time. And I always say that, challenging times are always the best time to learn. So, use this I agree with you, use this period to really, really actually develop your emotional vocabulary. And I have very, very simple 5 steps that I've developed to actually help people to kind of develop this emotion vocabulary during this stressful time. So the step 1 is, whenever there's an intense emotion coming up, say, you feel very angry, you're about to scream at your kid. So first step is to take a few deep breaths. So take a few slow, deep breaths, calm yourself down. And then the second step is to identify and label the emotion that come up. Like, what is that emotion? Focus on the what and not the why. Don't go like, oh, why he must spill the soy sauce, blah, 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 but instead go like, what is this emotion that I'm feeling? Okay, I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling troubled because I now have to do extra work cleaning it up. Okay, let's not go to the why, but more on labeling the emotions. Then repeat this. The third steps and the fourth steps is basically ask yourself again, what other emotions are there? What else am I feeling? So you are trying to actually, during this very intense emotional period, to get 3 emotional vocabulary out of you. And this is where the magic work starts. So this is step 4. By the time you got 3 emotional vocabulary out of yourself, this is how I feel. The 5th step is actually feel where the emotion is coming from. Is it coming from which part of your body? Is it coming from the stomach, the chest, the throat, whichever part of the body, right? And then kind of just give it a soothing pat or rub. And usually the magic here is that by the 3rd vocabulary that comes up, you actually feel more relaxed. The intensity of the emotions will actually be toned down. So this is the 5 steps process that I'm sharing with everyone. To actually at the same time to kind of keep yourself calm, so that you don't react with emotions, but rather you get a space to kind of process and respond with emotions. And at the same time, develop 3 emotional vocabulary every time you feel the intense emotions, right? So
Yeah. No, so I think very true. I mean, before you shout your child, before you start trolling people on the internet, or before you write a very long response to something that you disagree on the internet, I think understanding and defining those emotions are very good. I mean, it may even help you to write a better response to somebody that you want to disagree with or agree with on the internet. And I think I definitely agree with Angela in terms of how our emotions actually play a part in much more than we typically give it credit for. I think something our emotions are something that a lot of people may or may not be very in tune with, and I think that's something, especially in this time of COVID, it's and especially you're stuck at home, nowhere to go, you're not going to go shopping, you're not going to go to the beach, you're not going to go running around, you're not going to go dating. It's good to really sort of, and I think there's positive emotions, emotions of guilt. Thank you for sharing that. The 5 steps. So looking at it, take a deep breath, identify the name and emotion, ask what am I feeling, what are other emotions I'm feeling. So defining that 3 emotions, right? And then where the emotions are coming from a physical aspect. So you're translating not just that. You're translating not just that unconscious you're trying to make it that emotion a bit more tangible as well, right? With that, with by looking at where
and usually when we are able to identify the emotions, we are able to manage it better. So this exercise can serve dual purpose. One is for us to kind of really process the emotion and be able to respond better, and not in a rash manner that we may regret later. And the other one is really helps us to really develop that emotional vocabulary, because sometimes during this process you'll be like, I don't know how to name this emotion. What is this? What should I call it? So just stay curious, and after that do some research and try to identify the words that describe your feeling. So you realize that you actually learn along the way and pick up some new words.
Okay, well, I think that's a very, very good note to end off on. I think this is we'll leave this slide up for now. But I mean, I think from what we can see, it's very simple steps that anybody can take. And I think this is want to thank Angela for sharing this with us. So if you're watching the video, you can always go back to the screen a few seconds ago, and you maybe screenshot it. But yeah, I will definitely be sharing the details of Angela's book. And I really want to thank Angela for coming on today with the Everything Design Show, and really talking about how design and or emotions really plays a part in all the things that we're doing, from a professional to even individual psychological perspective. So yeah, well, thank you very much, Angela, for your time today. And yeah, if you want to connect with Angela, please feel free to find her details in the description below, as well as the description for the book. So yeah, we'll end off here, and thank you very much, Angela, for your time.
Thank
And
you, Nick.
yeah,
Thank you
no,
very
thank you for
much.
having
Thank you,
us.
everyone.
Yeah, and we'll hear from you soon. All right, okay, see you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.